And joining us now is Jane Goodall. I don't think I've ever said a woman who needs no introduction, but you really don't. Everybody knows who you are, and we're very grateful that you could spare some time for us and be here at TVO today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
My first question's a little odd, but I'm not sure I've ever interviewed anybody who's had the Order of the British Empire. What do I call you?
Well, you just call me Jane.
I'm not going to call you Jane. I mean, Dame Goodall, would that be appropriate?
No, Dame Jane is the correct if you want to, but...
Dame Jane?
But don't call me Dame Jane. It sounds like a pantomime to me.
Okay, very good. You're here because you're celebrating your 50th anniversary, and it's just, it's quite frankly remarkable that it's 50 years since that trip you took to Lake Tanganyika in Tanzania to start studying primates a long time ago. That wasn't your first foray, though, into the study of primates. It actually predated that by a few years, and I wonder if we could start by just having you tell us about that first trip, 1957.
The first trip was to Kenya to stay with a school friend, because my childhood dream was to go to Africa, live with animals, and write books about them.
Where did that dream come from?
Tarzan, the books.
Really?
Yes, Tarzan and Dr. Dolittle. That was, and then I began reading more and more and more books about Africa, and had this dream, and everybody laughed at me. You know, this was World War II. My family couldn't even afford a bicycle. Africa was the dark continent, and I was the wrong sex. I was a girl. So, you know, Jane, dream about something you can achieve, except my mother. And she would say, if you really want something and you work hard and you never give up, you find a way. So anyway, there I was, 23 years old, invited out to Africa by a school friend to get the money. I worked as a waitress. Got there, heard about the late Louis Leakey, went to see him at the Natural History Museum, and I think he was really impressed that this young girl who had no degree, knew so much about animals in Africa.
Well, that was interesting because you had no previous background in this. You hadn't gone to university. You hadn't studied on this. Yep. So where did, you know?
Books, books, books.
No, I hear you, but I mean, all of the obstacles that you just listed are enough. Any one of them would have been enough for this never to have taken place, and yet you seem to have overcome about a half a dozen of them to make it happen. How did it happen?
I suppose I was born, I think it was my mother. I mean, she really was a very wise person, and, you know, giving me this conviction that I could do anything if I really worked hard enough and wanted it enough. I think it was that. So I had confidence.
I've read many of the references to this time in your life, and you do give your mother the proper respect. Now, your folks divorced when you were young, right? So yes. I've never heard you talk about your father, though. Was he not an influence at this time?
Well,
in any of this?
I didn't know him, you see, because he joined up when I was 4 years old, when the war began. And after that, I didn't really see him, you know. So I think from him I was fortunate. I inherited a tough constitution, because he used to race motor cars in the days when motor racing was fun and not a business, you know.
Gotcha.
And he would be driving in Monte Carlo in these long rallies for days and days, and didn't need to eat much. And so I inherited all that part from him.
Understood. Obviously, on that trip to Kenya, the first trip, something clicked in you when you were there. Do you remember what it was?
Well, it was, I mean, just arriving there was the click. I mean, this was Africa, and I was there. And I can never forget the boat I was on landed at Mombasa, and then came the train journey up through to Nairobi. And in those days, the planes were filled with animals. So I was there. I was, you know, yes, this is it. And then Louis Leakey allowed me to go with himself, his wife, and one other young girl to a now very famous fossil dig, Olduvai. In those days, no humans had been found there, so it was wild, untouched Africa. And, you know, waking up every morning in my little tent, and usually you leave your dreams behind when you wake. I woke into mine. The animals were all there.
You mentioned there was another girl, but I'm guessing there could not have been very many other women that you were dealing with at that time. Is that right?
That's right. She also worked at the museum for Louis Leakey, and she was interested in paleontology, which of course I wasn't. I was there because of the animals, and so I said to Louis when he offered me a job, before I settle down and work for you in the museum, please can I get out into the bush, because that's what I'm here for. So he let me go. He said, providing my wife approves of you, you can come on this trip.
And she did.
Well, luckily she did.
Luckily she did.
Yeah.
But presumably this was a very male-dominated environment that you were working in.
It was very male-dominated, yes.
What made him think that a young girl had something to contribute?
Because he always liked working with women. He found that they were sensitive. He particularly wanted someone who hadn't been to university, although he didn't tell me that at the time. And he didn't want a mind that was biased by the very reductionist thinking of the animal behavior science of the time. And he felt that women had more patience and made better observers.
Do you agree with him?
Well, I think it was probably a lot of it built in, you know, to our genes to be a good mother in the sort of old-fashioned sense of the word, where you really sat at home and raised your kids. Like a chimpanzee, you need to be patient. You need to be able to understand the wants of a small creature that doesn't speak, our own children. And women traditionally have been very quick to feel the sort of tensions in a family situation. And so, you know, to keep the child away from the uncle if the uncle's in a bad mood. And I think that's probably helpful in observing primates as well.
Eventually you did go for the PhD and you went for formal education. How did that change the way you approached everything?
Well, it didn't. Louis said I had to go and get a PhD. There wasn't time for a BA. And when I got to Cambridge, they told me I'd done everything wrong. You know, the chimps being given names, and that wasn't scientific. They should have had numbers. And I couldn't talk about their vivid personalities. I couldn't talk about their obvious minds and capability of thinking. And I absolutely shouldn't talk about them having emotions, because those were all unique to us. But fortunately, I'd learned during childhood from my dog that that wasn't true. Animals do have personalities, minds, and feelings.
So they said all this to you, and
Yes.
you said all that back to them, and how did you resolve your differences?
I didn't actually say it, I just thought it. And I had a very wise supervisor, and although at the start he was my sternest critic, he then came to Gombe and he saw the chimpanzees, and he began to understand what I was talking about. And one day I'd written that Fifi, the 6-year-old daughter of Flo, was jealous if another infant came and tried to play with her baby brother. She was jealous and chased them away. And Robert said, but you can't say she was jealous. You can't prove it. And I said, well, no. So what shall I say? This is so clever. He said, I suggest you say Fifi behaved in such a way that had she been a human child, we would say she was jealous. Now, you can't be criticized for that.
Very clever. Well, all right, since you brought it up, 50 years ago was Gombe. Now, what were the circumstances that took you to there in the first place?
After I'd been on this, or during the time I was with Louis Leakey in this tiny little expedition, he realized that, you know, I didn't care about parties and makeup and hair and clothes and things like that, and that I was the person he'd been looking for, he says, for 10 years, to go and try and study not just any animal, which I would have, but chimpanzees, more like us than any other living creature. And it took him a year to get the money, and then we had to get permission from what was then a British protectorate, Tanganyika, and the British authorities were absolutely not prepared to take responsibility for this young girl. What a crazy idea. But in the end, they said, all right, if she has a companion. And so it was my amazing mother. She upped and came we had money for 6 months, and she came for 4 of those 6 months.
Did you ever think at some point this just isn't going to happen, there's too many obstacles to making it happen?
No, I mean, Louis Leakey was the one who made those things happen. I just left it to him.
Okay, you're there on the site. And again, I'm very curious about that first Eureka moment where you are studying the primates and you see something that no one's ever seen before. What was it that was the Eureka moment?
Well, the Eureka moment, in hindsight anyway, was seeing a chimpanzee not only picking a piece of grass to use to fish for termites, but also picking a leafy twig and stripping the leaf, because that's modifying, that's making a tool. And at that time, it was thought that only humans used and made tools. So man, the tool maker, is how we were defined when I was growing up. And so when I told Louis Leakey, I can almost imagine his huge smile when I told him about this. And he sent a telegram back saying, now we have to redefine man, redefine tool, or accept chimpanzees as humans.
Did he believe it?
Did he believe it? Probably he did. Because, you know, there are people who want to include chimpanzees in the genus Homo.
Sure, but I mean, that would have been such a departure from the conventional wisdom of the day.
Oh, did he believe my observation?
Exactly, yeah.
Of course he did.
Oh, all right. He had he absolutely believed and had
Totally.
trust in your observations.
Yes.
How about the rest of the scientific world? Were they ready to shoot you down?
Well, a lot of them said I must have taught the chimps, and that would have been a feat indeed, since I couldn't really get near them. But, you know, then we got some photographs of the tool using, and then my first husband was sent by National Geographic and got all this footage, which really took the chimpanzees into the hearts and minds of people around the world.
What were some of the other things you uncovered as you continued to watch them?
Well, the fact they hunt medium-sized mammals, and if they make a kill, they share, they show sharing behavior. Then the communication, kissing, embracing, holding hands, patting one another on the back. Gradually, as the years went by, learning about the long-term affectionate, supportive bonds between family members, how even a young male of 25 years old may actually need the support of his mother in a social situation. Learned about how if a mother dies, a brother is a very good caregiver as well as a sister. And even a non-related adolescent male adopted a small motherless infant. But also the shocking part was that I thought they were so like us but nicer. And then learning about brutality, the patrols around the territory, and if a stranger is seen, the chase, and then brutal, horrifying attacks, leaving the victim to die. That was a shock.
Or mothers eating their young?
We had 2 females who cooperated to take the newborn babies of other females in their own community, but only like if it was the first 1 or 2 days. And I think there must have been a different smell. I thought it was aberrant behavior, but we've seen attempts of the same sort again.
Does that shock you to see that kind of thing?
Yes, totally. Absolutely shocking. It was very, very hard to believe. Hard to believe.
What did any of those insights tell you about human behavior?
It helped me to understand, you know, something of our evolutionary path. If we believe, as Louis Leakey did, that there was a ape-like, human-like common ancestor about 6 million years ago, then behavior that we see in chimpanzees today and humans today was probably present in that common ancestor. That's what Louis Leakey believed. So that he hoped learning about chimp behavior in the wild would help him to better understand how early humans might have behaved, because he was searching for their fossilized remains.
This may be admittedly a bit of a silly question, given that I think they were probably bigger and stronger than you. But when you saw a mother murdering babies, did you want to intervene? Did you want to go stop it? Did the maternal instinct in you scream out to do something?
It wasn't so much the paternal instinct, but passion and Pom. You know, she was not a good mother herself. And here she is with this adolescent daughter attacking some of these females with tiny babies who I knew so well. And mostly you couldn't do anything. They was way up in a tree. On one occasion, somebody threw a rock at Passion because we saw her kill 5 babies. And she didn't even notice the rock. So they are totally concentrated. And the strange thing was when they'd killed the baby then and started to eat it, they were then friendly with the mother. It was really strange.
How close were you when you observed this?
Aberrant. Well, I only saw one such occasion, and I was, well, it was up in a tall tree, maybe 30 feet up.
Ever fear for your own safety?
Occasionally with the big males, especially at the beginning. At first they ran away because they'd never seen a white ape before. But then after a bit, they got used to me, thanks to one chimpanzee, David Greybeard, who of all these 50 years was my favorite. And so the others began to lose their fear, but then they became a bit aggressive, like, well, we're not frightened of her, but who is she? And let's treat her like a predator. And they have this very scary call, and they would be shaking branches and bristling, and as you say, much stronger than me. Not bigger, but stronger.
So if, presumably at some point, you had to think to yourself, if I get in trouble, what am I going to do? And what would you have done?
I'd probably have been killed. I mean, I couldn't do anything.
So
You can't do anything.
You were never armed, obviously, right?
No.
Never a gun? Bodyguard with a gun?
No,
Nothing.
no.
So
Just at the very beginning, I was forced to take one of the men with me, one of the rangers, because they didn't like me being out alone, but that didn't last too long.
well, I mean, that is just remarkably, you know, it's either crazy or it's remarkably trusting. Why would you do that?
Because that was my dream, because I didn't want to let Louis Leakey down, because I had absolute conviction that if I wasn't hurting them, they weren't going to hurt me, and they didn't.
What's the most interesting thing your research has led you to discover about us, humans?
Well, there are two things, really. The first is a sort of in general. Because chimpanzees are so like us biologically and behaviorally, because they show so many characteristics that we used to think unique to ourselves, it's become very clear there's no sharp line dividing us from all the other animals. And so this teaches us some humility. We are less arrogant. We can have new respect, not only for chimps, but the other amazing animals we share the planet with.
Have you discovered over the intervening 50 years that humankind is a humble species?
No, not at all.
I haven't seen that.
No, not at all. But there is a growing awareness of the fact that we are not quite this totally separate creature from the other animal. It is generally acknowledged we're part of the animal kingdom. So that's one step in the right direction. Many, many, many people have told me that when they read the first book, In the Shadow of Man, they began thinking about animals differently, and that's all over the world, like in China and Japan and Vietnam and so forth. But the other thing I discovered, which is more kind of personal in a way for us, is the tremendous importance of early experience in the life of infants. It's obvious in chimpanzees. The different kind of mothering and family makes a huge difference. And child psychologists today are saying it's exactly the same for humans.
You've been at this for a very long time, and I wonder, what are you still curious to know?
Well, our team is finding out a lot of new facts even as I speak. I'm not there doing research anymore because I'm so busy trying to help conserve the few remaining chimpanzees left. But we're learning from new technologies, GIS, GPS, more about range. Satellite imagery is helping us, you know, pinpoint why they spend more time in certain areas than others. From fecal samples, we can, for the first time, be sure who the fathers are. We can find out information about levels of stress and as it relates to hormones, all from fecal samples. So all these things are new from when I was first there.
Do you still get over there?
I get there twice a year, but not to do research. Just to be out in the forest and recharge my batteries.
It has that effect still, does it?
Oh, yes.
Let's talk about your institute. You established the Jane Goodall Institute in 1977. What are the goals of the institute?
Well, the goals of the institute, which, you know, was established in the US, and now there are 27 Jane Goodall Institutes, including, of course, the one in Canada.
Yeah, there's a Canadian one that was established in 77.
janegoodall.ca. The goals are to continue to research chimpanzees in the wild and non-invasive captive and other primates, to conserve chimpanzees in their habitats, to educate people about what's wrong with the world. And I think one of the major contributions we've made is that it's very obvious, unless you improve the lives of the people living around the national park, which we do with our Take Care program, there's no hope of any conservation lasting.
And how well are we doing at that?
Amazing. So 20 years ago, fly over the Gombe region, and apart from the little jewel of forest that was Gombe National Park, outside all the trees had gone. Because we're now working with 42 villages and improving their lives, working with women with microcredit, introducing our youth program Roots and Shoots, teaching care and concern for the environment, improving their lives in many, many ways. Now, they've turned around to become our partners, and we see trees growing back on this devastated landscape. and the water tables being saved. We see the opportunity once more for the chimps to move out of the tiny national park and interact with others, which is the only way they can survive in the long term.
Is it not also true, though, that their numbers are down?
There were probably somewhere way over 1 million when I began in 1960. It's thought maximum 300,000 today, and those are stretched over 21 nations. So many, like Gombe, are small, isolated groups, and with little hope for long-term survival.
Does that not depress you, that all of your life's efforts, in this population is very much threatened?
Of course it does, but that's really the impetus to develop our programs, to seek more funding, and we have now got funding from CEDA for some work in Uganda to extend chimpanzee habitat, and our youth program, which is changing minds of young people now in 120 countries around the world.
I've read it's about 10,000 kids who've been through this program or something. I think I read that somewhere.
It's way more. I mean, in Canada, I don't know, there's nearly 600 groups in Canada alone. But, worldwide, we've got somewhere between 15 and 18,000 active groups, with a group averaging about 30 kids. And this is preschool through university.
Let me ask you about something that, I haven't met too many United Nations messengers of peace, but I'm sitting with one right now.
You
and
are.
You've been one for a long time, about a decade or so, haven't you?
Yes, Kofi Annan appointed me in 2003.
Oh, okay.
And Ban Ki-moon reappointed me.
So what do you have to do for that?
Well, basically, it was through the Roots and Shoots program, because I told Kofi Annan, everywhere I go, because the philosophy is shared by all these young people in all these different countries, and it's all about the fact that each one of us makes an impact on the planet every day, and that each group is working to make things better for animals, for people, for the environment, and to break down the barriers that we erect between different cultures and religions and nations, and between us and the natural world. I said, so I'm sowing seeds of global peace. But I said, I can't do any more than I'm doing now, traveling 300 days a year. So I'm not sure I can accept this messenger of peace business. And he said, Jane, I wouldn't ask anybody to do as much as you're doing, but just, if there's a United Nations program that you feel is a good one where you go, then if you can talk about it, that's all.
You're going to forgive me if you're vain about your age, but I'm going to spill the beans here, because I don't know too many 76-year-olds. You just turned 76. Yeah. And I don't know too many who are traveling 300 days a year. Where's home for you? Do you ever feel at home anywhere?
Yes, the house I grew up in, where I dreamed of Tarzan, where I climbed the trees and thought of Africa. It now belongs to me and my sister. She lives there with her family, her 2 grandchildren, her daughter. And that's where I go in between trips. So that's home. It's where all my things are. It's where I do my writing, for which I don't have enough time.
I want people to know that I'm going to ask you this question, and I'm not asking you this question because you're a woman, because I've asked this question of Ralph Nader in the past. Ralph Nader, ran for president and a great consumer champion, and I think probably almost the same age as you right now. Never had any children. And I always asked him, about that road not taken. Does he ever regret now? Now, you did have 1 child.
I have a child and 3 grandchildren.
And 3 grandchildren. But obviously, working as hard as you did on what you did meant that you were not going to have a big family. You weren't going to have a lot of children. And I wondered, as you sit back and look at things right now, whether you wonder about that road not taken.
One of the main underlying causes of all the problems on this poor old overstretched planet of ours is the sheer number of people. And I never would have had more than 2 children, because I don't think it's ethical, actually. I would have had 2, but it didn't work out that way. I had 1, and I've got 3 grandchildren, so it's kind of evened out, hasn't it? And he's now helping in some of the conservation efforts. He's a fantastic young man.
Your son?
Yes, and we're working together on an ecotourism project to save a whole huge area in the southeast of Tanzania from hunting safaris.
Jane, in our last minute, oh gosh, I just called you Jane. I can't believe I did that.
You're supposed to.
Yeah, I know you told me to, but still it feels strange. You have a lot more work to do, obviously, but someday in the future, when they write about you, what do you want your legacy to be that they say?
Well, you know, people are always asking me this, and I don't know. I think one part of it is helping people to understand the true nature of animals. They're not objects, they're not things, they don't work like clockwork. But the other is giving hope, especially to youth. I think that's my main job now, because if we lose hope, and so many people have, then we may as well give up. And as I travel everywhere, I meet so many amazing people doing so many incredible things that I have to have hope that we can somehow get out of this mess before it's too late. But it's nearly too late.
What an honor for all of us to have you in that chair today. Thank you so much for visiting us at TVO tonight.
Well, thank you.